Glenn, congratulations on the launch of your very interesting book on the progress of the BRICS countries and also in comparison to South Africa. Give us a brief outline of the book and its perspective.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, it's been 2.5 years of traveling. We spent that period of time visiting each country in 6-month sequence, between about 10 days and 21 days per different country, trying to get a bit of perspective about what are these BRICS, and in particular the small s, the one at the end, South Africa. What does it mean for South Africa? What does it mean for Africa? Is the S a small s or a large s?
Mm-hmm. And in brief, what are the main lessons learned in terms of the BRICS and in terms specifically of South Africa?
So the lessons were many, and sometimes people look at countries and say, for example, China. The reason China is successful is because they've got a command economy and they can force things down. That may not necessarily be the case. One may, and our sense is that as that top-down infrastructure is withdrawn, it's allowed the private sector to come through from the bottom. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be cautious about lessons. I think there are many lessons in our book, cover many of them, and we detail what we call the Big Five. South Africa is famous for its Big Five in terms of animal life. Yeah. We talk about a Big Five in terms of lessons that the book talks about in terms of South Africa.
And moving to the currencies perspective, obviously being from a Forex angle, give us an idea of each of the BRIC currencies, where they stand, say starting with the globally traded South African rand and then moving on to the other BRICS.
Okay, great. But at the end of the day, many of them are often challenged. It's difficult currencies we deal with here. South Africa, very liquid rand. Many would argue it's oversold, and that may well be the case, but it does face some structural problems. A lot of capital flight out of the likes of South Africa, and a lot of political challenges at this point in time. So valuation base, probably gone too far, probably on the cheap side. Certainly managers talk about purchasing power parity, the PPP model, and South Africa looks particularly cheap on that type of basis. I wouldn't differ. We come here to London and you buy a bottle of Coke and it can cost you an exorbitant sum of money. So one can see from a purchasing power perspective that the rand does look cheap. Mm-hmm. The Real, the Brazilian currency, had a period of time where it strengthened actually very significantly. That has started to weaken again. That's probably necessary. The problem with Brazil is they do have this inflationary concern that they have to protect and make sure that they don't have rising inflation. So interest rates may need to go up, which may provide some support. In the short term, it's cost them. It's been a difficult environment. And we encountered that when we went into the country. Also felt very expensive to us. India has had the benefit of a recent election. President Modi coming through has been beneficial both to the stock market and to the currency, both of which have performed very strongly. Mm-hmm. It remains to be seen whether or not he can implement all of these changes, and the talk is good, but it's 100 days odd in, and now can he sustain that through the period of time, and can the rupee, which is also often a very vulnerable currency, continue? Mm-hmm. Ruble, very, very different story, because obviously we've had sanctions imposed on Russia as a consequence of what's happened in Crimea and in Ukraine, etc. A huge amount of capital flight out of that country, so that currency has been under enormous pressure. Again, you'd probably argue it's gone too far. It's probably too cheap, probably due for a bounce at some point in time, but structurally I see that as being a weak currency. And the Chinese currency is the most fascinating of all, because at the end of the day it could become the reserve currency of the world. It certainly is going to be a challenge to the US dollar full time, and has obviously strengthened over many years, but of late it has weakened. And I think there's a lot of debate, and I think one could have a very interesting discussion, longer than what we have necessarily on this video tape, as to where it's going. But an important currency it certainly will be. So amongst those BRICS, it's the large C, the capital C, it's China, which is going to dictate where it goes, and with that the renminbi.
Okay, Glenn, and if one wants to get a hold of a copy of your book, how does one do that?
So the best way to do this is to go onto our website, Investment Solutions. It's a South African-based company, and one is able to order books through that. Unfortunately, at this point in time, our book is not in e-version just yet, but that should change from January 2015, in which case it should be easily accessible around the globe.
Brilliant. Well, congratulations once again on your book on behalf of e-Forex magazine, and thanks very much for the interview today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Glenn.